It's Monday, so Joe Lindsley is again on TVP World to give you the report from the front lines, or actually from the places where the war is being waged. Joe is in Kyiv. Welcome back.
Yeah, hello from Kyiv, and I would say there's two big stories right here at the moment. It was a bit of a loud weekend. There were many drone attacks. The Russians sent many of the Iranian suicide drones prowling throughout the entire country of Ukraine on Friday night and Saturday night. And, these things they travel sort of stealthily over the rivers, through the forest, over fields, while Ukrainians are frantically trying to track them down. Just imagine, you're sitting wherever you are in Ukraine, you have reports are coming toward you, and then the flocks of drones sort of change course. In the end, both Friday and Saturday, many of them came toward Kyiv. They were approaching from all different directions. Here in the center of the city, you can see the searchlights moving around, looking for these incoming drones. But it's very important to note that, we heard explosions here, but they were distant because the air defense is so sharp here that all these drones were swatted away before they could get to the capital. But then there's a bigger story, which I do keep reiterating as week by week, because this is still should be, I think, the biggest headline, is the absence of major attacks, major nationwide missile attacks by Russia. You look at all the headlines and all the experts, including folks at the Institute for the Study of War, were saying back in the late summer, bat in the hatches, Russia's infrastructure attacks are coming, winter is coming, and that has not happened yet. Last year, those attacks began October 10th. It has still not happened. The drones are much cheaper than missiles. The drones are certainly, the Russians are poking and prying and testing the system, but we do see this fundamental difference. We could say, it is now 58 days.
What do you make of it? Because when we read, I quoted the report made by one of the German think tanks that actually the Russian, according to the authors, the Russian capabilities are intact in a way. Well, they do not claim that it's intact, but Russia is capable of rebuilding it pretty soon and attack another country in 6 or 10 years. But based on what you say and our previous conversations, it looks like this lack of major missile attacks seems to be a kind of a weakness of Russian Federation. Do I understand it properly? Because we all expect the attacks on the Ukrainian infrastructure, energy infrastructure, yet the winter is on actually, and no attacks.
Yeah. Well, by the way, it's cold here. The past several days have been in the 20s. First thing to remember, Ukrainians survived last winter. So even if there is another barrage of 100 missiles a week attacking infrastructure, they're ready, more ready than they were last year for it. But that hasn't happened yet. And we have to look at the coincidence. Again, it's 58 days since, by coincidence, I mean the precise date, 58 days since Ukraine, an extraordinary feat, hit the headquarters of the Black Sea Fleet. Where is Russia's response to that? If I'm an editor in London or New York, that's my question every day. Where is Russia's response to this extraordinary attack? But instead, and I think this is where we have to be really aware of the propaganda war, which, by the way, for example, we see Hamas playing so well in Israel. But instead, we have negative headlines about Ukraine. So Kyiv is so safe that today, Lachlan Murdoch, the new, he took over for his father at News Corporation, my former company that I escaped. Lachlan Murdoch was in Kyiv, and Lloyd Austin, U.S. Secretary of Defense, were both in Kyiv. I saw over the weekend, I really felt that Kyiv was protected by what you could call an iron dome. Kyiv is extraordinarily protected. There's no major Russian missile attacks. It's cold, it's winter. These attacks are not happening. We hear all kinds of, be afraid, winter is coming. And then what we see, if you look at the stories and headlines about Ukraine, hardly any say, Ukraine's in a pretty good position because of the Storm Shadow missiles. And by the way, if those were the headlines, Michal, with 3 Storm Shadow missiles, they hit the Black Sea Fleet headquarters, then there would be pressure on Germany to send the Taurus long-range missiles. But there's not. And Ukrainians have proven if they had those Taurus missiles from Germany right now, during this lull of Russian attacks, they could do extraordinary damage to the Russian bases and the Russian fleet.
So, Joe, what do you make of this lack of information about the obvious success? We talked last week about what is going on in the in the Kherson area. It looks like Ukraine managed to put its foot on the other side of the Dnieper river. It is an important information regarding the changes in the front line that are being counted in hundreds of yards, as we reported last week. So this is an important information, that's for sure. We are talking all the time about what's going on in Avdiivka, the struggle, the fight of Russia against Ukraine. But do you think, or this is actually the issue that I'm thinking of, that those informations that are pointing to this war as a kind of long-standing conflict that Ukraine is unable to win is a preparing ground for a peace talks? Because this is the way I understood this ridiculous information by Olaf Scholz, that he is thinking about making a phone call to Vladimir Putin, but the conditions are that he is going to withdraw troops from the Ukraine territory. Come on, everybody knows that he's not going to do this, and everybody knows that they're preparing some kind of negotiations. So what do you make of it?
Well, in the case of Scholz, the pressure should be, where are the Taurus long-range missiles? Ukrainians have proven what they can do, and we can put an end to this. And even if you look at the Institute for the Study of War, I respect those people. I used to work with them in Washington when I worked at the Weekly Standard. They're not deep experts. They're not here on the ground. They live in the think tank world of Washington, and so they don't. They're not even warriors. So they're not really connected to the absolute reality here on the ground. And I think a lot of people in Washington still can't believe that victory for Ukraine is really possible. But that's what this window of the past several months, there's really been no major, cities like Lviv in the West, there's been no missile attack since July. This is an enormous window of opportunity where if we were paying attention, the West and the free world would seize upon it. But there's no media coverage of it. In fact, the media coverage, Michal, is the opposite. If you look at the headlines recently from the BBC about Ukraine, are not about how well protected Ukrainian cities are away from the front lines, which, by the way, still frontline cities like Rachon get the Russians are shelling the hell out of it. So near the front, but far away from that, it's a different story. And the major headline about Ukraine from the BBC the past days was about 20,000 Ukrainian defectors crossing rivers and forests to leave Ukraine. And now this has trickled to CNN and all different sources. And so if you're just a regular consumer of news in America, in Europe, you think, last story I heard about Ukraine, not about success, but about people trying to leave. It's a small number. It's 20,000. And the BBC, for all of its volume, it was a special BBC investigation. They spent a ton of resources to go track down individual, poor guys, individual Ukrainians trying to get away from the fight. They found them. They investigated. They tracked down. Where are the investigative resources on the children who were kidnapped in Russia? Where, for example, it'd be lovely to have a BBC investigation of the actual breakdown of American spending in Ukraine, which is not as much as it seems. Mainly, it's the value of old equipment. That would be a helpful investigation. But instead, in the moment of Ukraine's actually great strategic successes, which includes, as you say, occupying now, or reaching now part of the left bank in that sort of delta in the Kherson region. There's a lot of islands and it's very marshy. There's great evidence that Ukrainians are across the water. They're pushing the Russians back. Instead of talking about these stories, but especially the damage to the Russian Black Sea Fleet, the major stories we get about Ukraine are these strange, 20,000 guys have crossed the border.
Joe, you mentioned that
that's all they got.
You mentioned that another kind of investigation would be helpful. I think that the question is, who would it be helpful to, and what would it be helpful for? Well, this kind of investigations are definitely helpful if you do want to end this war in a situation like this, where Russia is controlling Crimea, where Russia is controlling Donetsk and Luhansk region, where basically we do have a frozen conflict, which at least I do read between the lines as I read the reports and claims of Olaf Scholz that he missed phone calls to Vladimir Putin. Come on, Emmanuel Macron probably misses those phone calls as well as he, last time he called, Putin told him that he's got to go play hockey or go, to do some workout in a gym. Do you think that this kind of media, the Western media attitude towards Russian war in Ukraine changed because there is a kind of expectation that this conflict is going to be frozen and that the Western world can come back to business as usual?
I think the first explanation is more innocent, and it's just due to humans not thinking. I mean, so often reporters and media, you react, even here, I keep saying every week what I believe should be the major headline, that Ukraine is doing an amazing job. The fact that there's no major Russian nationwide missile attacks is a huge story. And no one wants to hear that. Oh, you can say it once, but you can't say it over and over again, even though that is the story. That should be putting pressure on Schultz to end this, to get the Taurus long-range missiles here. But instead, reporters want to find some interesting new angle. So they really now are having to stretch. I mean, the ridiculous BBC story about the 20,000 Ukrainian defectors and tracking them down like they're hunting like ex-Nazi agents. I mean, they really put so much effort into that story. And instead, they need to be looking at that. This is the moment when Ukraine can win, and then ask the question: are we being played now by propaganda? It's the same, for example, the same BBC that quotes Hamas officials about the hospitals. We can't trust them. Every story about Hamas and Israel should say that Hamas wants the total destruction of Israel, but they don't say that in the story. The stories are lazy, and we see the same thing with stories about Ukraine and Russia. And there's an interesting development that the new president, kind of wildcat, I don't know much about him, but the guy who's just elected president of Argentina, Javier Milei.
He rocks the social media right now, yeah. That's true. There's a part of his story that is not in any media account. He supports Ukraine. He believes in freedom. He believes that Moscow and Beijing are enemies to the free world and to the civilized world. He even said, I brought the Ukrainian flag to Congress because those of us who support the ideas of freedom cannot tolerate or support an invasion of Russia like Russia has done in Ukraine. And see, this is interesting because the media is not going to mention that because they don't like him because he's not in their camp for the most part, the elite media. But then the American sort of biggest voices in the MAGA and MAGA light world don't mention this because they inexplicably don't support Ukraine. But you have the people of Argentina voted for a guy who supports freedom and supports Ukraine. That story gets missed. By the way, the previous government of Argentina is United States. And this story was also missed. Last month, United States agreed to send F-16s. They gave the Kingdom of Denmark permission to send American-made F-16s to Argentina. And I forget what war Argentina is fighting right now, but they're getting F-16s while Ukraine is still waiting for the F-16s to arrive in 2024. Yeah, I wonder how long will it take for the new Argentinian president to become a villain of the free world with the ideas like this. I think it's just a matter of time. It seems to me that if you are having this kind of set of ideas on your political agenda, it's just a matter of time when you are going to be bashed by the mainstream media all around the world. Hopefully, none of this is going to happen. Actually, we have to talk to someone who knows what is exactly going on right now in Argentina. Joe, we got about 2 minutes, so we would like to go through the possible fundraisers and the things that you do collect and money that you collect to support people who are fighting Russian aggression in Ukraine. How is it going?
Well, Miguel, thanks. And actually, in the past week, the donations have started to return, which is great because ever since Hamas invaded Israel with the help of Russia and Tehran, it was drying up. And so now I think we'll be in a position this week to buy several night visions and a truck. And we welcome additional support at UkrainianFreedomNews.com. By the way, over the weekend in Lviv, a great story, there was a convoy of more than 100 British farmers, men and women. They drove from the UK through the Channel Tunnel, a convoy of 35 SUVs, and they brought them through Europe, through Poland, to Lviv in Ukraine to donate them, all traveling together. And so even while Schultz and others dither about sending long-range weapons, which could end this quickly, you have the free people of the world doing extraordinary things like those 100 British farmers coming here to stand up to the aggression in different ways. So if anyone watching wants to join and do, help, you can be a part of that effort. We welcome support. UkrainianFreedomNews.com for thermal visions, night visions, and for trucks.
Joe, thanks a lot for your presence. Do your job, stay safe. Come back with your report next week. We see each other on Monday.
Until Monday. Dziękuję.
Ciao.